All right, sorry for the delay. I was going to tell a story about so a lot of people will submit blank documents for their submission for basically whenever like they don't have a submission as part of the group work. Some people will get creative and submit memes, and I'm not going to mention any names, but there was a meme circulating around, had a picture of someone in this class, not going to mention any names, but is like a call ID and said potential fraud. Why is everybody looking that direction? I didn't mention any names. I didn't mention any names, but yeah. So anyway, I was going to share that, but unfortunately, I'm having trouble with technology. So besides, we need to get started because we got a round of interrogations to do, and we got some interviewing. So today we're talking about the NCAA betting scandal, which is a fairly recent one, and this is basically how I describe not to escalate a fraud. So the escalation of this fraud is basically what happened to its downfall, and the kind of there was a basically, so the way this started out is this is a couple of individuals. I think it was Shane Hennon and Maves Fairley, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing their names. But they kind of conducted the scheme to do some point shaving with respect to a professional Chinese basketball game, and it worked out. It was actually Antonio Blakeney, and again, I'm not familiar with current NBA players. I know he was an NBA prospect, but then kind of busted out with the Bulls, and then went to the Chinese basketball leagues and was pretty much an all-star. And they said, "Hey, would you like to make more money?" And they started paying him for the games, and just had subpar performances that ended up kind of busting his team, and they made a lot of money off that. And if they'd been satisfied with that, everything would have been fine. They said, "I bet we could expand this scheme." And remember, it's escalation and perpetuation of fraud. Yeah. And so started out with the Chinese Basketball Association games, and then I moved on to the NBA games, and kind of was with a few different individuals, but one of the ones that was identified was Jalen Smith. So his basketball coach was training players prepared for the NBA draft and was giving them inside information about what was going on with the NBA games, about when players were sitting or they were not healthy or they have subpar performances. And so they were making a trade on that. And even that was going okay, although there was some interesting things that you might remember. So is anybody a big follower of the NBA? So does anybody remember the name Jonte Porter? So yeah, Raptors center, power forward center, and was banned from the NBA for life in April 2024, simply because of the schemes that were going on here. So they were aware of this, and again, this is kind of where everything kind of was obviously unraveling. But one of the comments that was made in one of the articles, and this is one of the ones I thought was interesting. So there's some interesting stuff. We're talking about Maves Fairley swears he can help you make money. We're cashing all day, and every hour you're not tapped into money is tapped into money you're leaving on the table. I mean, if that doesn't scream fraud scheme right there, I don't know what does. But yeah. There was a comment from this article a little bit later on. It said talking about gaining an illicit edge in the NBA means persuading one of 450 multimillionaire athletes to risk their livelihoods. So talking to Jonte Porter says, what were you thinking? All right. So there are individuals out there who will do it, but for the most part, they're not really to do that. So they targeted a different audience, and that was going to be college basketball, specifically college basketball players with not a whole lot of prospects. So this has to do with name, image, and likeness deals, which has become increasingly problematic, I guess is the term I want to use over recent years. So name, image, likeness is a fairly new phenomenon, and the idea being is that college athletes should be able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. Does anybody play like the college sports games like NCAA football and stuff like that? So it used to be that once you signed on to be a player in on one or for one of the major teams, and the NCAA football is one of the big ones, but this could actually be applicable to other sports as well. And so, yeah, there was just this implicit understanding that you would share your name, image, and likeness without any compensation. And people started saying, well, basically, students are scraping by. At least that's what the idea was. You may get some arguments that students weren't really scraping by, but they were saving money under the table. But that's a different set of frauds right there. So they said if they're going to be using the name, image, and likeness, they should be able to profit from it. And all of a sudden, you had a whole bunch of college athletes that were becoming multimillionaires that are playing along individuals who basically are getting nothing. So, which, depending on your point of view, is emblematic for society, I suppose. But that's certainly an issue when you talk about that. By the way, just an interesting phenomenon. Does anybody know who the person right now with the highest name, image, and likeness endorsements is? It's not even a professional football player or a professional basketball player. It's the professional gymnast, TikTok star. I don't remember her name, but yeah, so that's kind of a really well-known TikTok star. But yeah, so it's not even just limited to these athletes for their athletic prowess, but kind of their fame and other capacities. And so there was kind of this problem with these people who are getting lots of money and these other individuals who are kind of in the same position have no money whatsoever. So they came up with a scheme, and it was kind of an ingenious idea. It says, if we bet on small games, we can actually entice these individuals who don't have any money to take $10,000, which is a relatively small amount of money for them, to take $10,000 to kind of do some point shaving schemes. And so they talked about kind of the financial impact of the fraud, and the whole financial impact of the fraud was really not well publicized, but they gave some figures on this. So $458,000 for North Carolina A&T to lose against Towson, which I've heard of those schools before, but I don't really follow them in basketball. I never have. $424,000 on Kent State to cover first half spread versus Buffalo, $275,000 for Southern Miss not to cover first half spread against South Alabama, and $256,000 for Robert Morris to flop in the first half of a game against Northern Kentucky. Now we're going to talk about that. You'll notice that a lot of those schemes actually related to first half performance, and that was alluded to in the Dan Patrick clip, and it kind of relates to opportunity that we're going to talk a little bit about. But players with minimal or no NIL deals were paid $10,000 to $30,000 to intentionally compromise games. Now, here's kind of the issue with this is that reason that I say that this is destructive. If they had kind of said that we're going to make you a small amount of money and we're going to bet a small amount of money, this probably would have been going on and on and on. Problem is, who bets $500,000 on North Carolina A&T versus Towson? Don't raise your hand. I'm going to think you got real sports betting problems if that's the case. All right. So yeah, $500,000 on a game that's little to no consequence. That's not going to raise a red flag? I don't know what is. Now we talk about red flags in our other classes and we say this is a big signal. This is a signal. This is basically like standing on top of a tower that's 1,000 feet in the air and doing a blaring light saying, yeah, you might as well pay attention to what we're doing. So because this is very, very obvious that something's going on because massive amounts of money that would never exchange hands in normal circumstances are being bet on this. And so this was kind of facilitated by the issues that we're going to talk about here in just a second. So what are some of the identification of fraud risk factors? So we can talk about the pressure, and the pressure is something we've already talked about to some extent. So if you're working with somebody on the same team who's receiving massive amounts of money from a name, image, and likeness deal, are you going to feel a little bit shafted because you're doing the same job effectively, but you're not getting the same compensation? Probably so, okay, and that's going to be part of the rationalization as well. But definitely, there's pressure. Like you're trying to make ends meet on a college student's income, whereas this person over here is buying new cars and buying watches and buying all the bling. And is that even a term anymore? I don't even know. I'm so out of date. So yeah, so all these things that go into the prospects of that. So the easy identification of pressure. What about the opportunity? What was your identification of the opportunity here? I obviously talked about the opportunity a little bit above, but first half, but I want to talk about the general opportunity. What do we know about sports betting nowadays? Is there more or less friction associated with sports betting? Far or less, far less. In fact, last fall, 2025, fall of 2025, the NCAA was actually considering the possibility of allowing college athletes to participate in sports betting. They did not pass that resolution. Thank God. All right. Not saying I'm not trying to talk against sports betting because some people have pastime, but I'm going to say that was a population that has very, very competitive and addictive personalities already, and not necessarily the strongest fiscal common sense. All right. So all those name, image, likeness deals, that money that you'd be getting from that would be going right back to the sports bettors, right back to the sports bettors. So certainly problematic. There's also so sports betting is kind of one of those markets we talked about, but is there larger markets that can also be compromised for this? Has anybody heard of the term prediction markets? Not poly markets, but poly markets, another term. So Kalshi is receiving a lot of attention lately, and this is basically where you can bet on anything. You engage in a contract with another individual, and the winner of the contract wins the funds. Which that's just gambling at its most corrupt core right there. Okay? That's me speaking. Okay, don't go to prediction markets, guys. Come on, come on. You're better than that. Sports betting is fine, okay? You can minimize your losses. Prediction markets, you've got a problem, okay? You've got a problem. So yeah, a certain problem. And then we talked about the first half issue. So what was the logic that was given in the Dan Patrick video about why they were doing first half betting?
uh, raise their performance in the second half, so it could just look like, oh, like they got started sluggish.
Yeah. So you got a player is just like, I had a crappy first half. I'm going to improve in the second half, and then basically goes to average performance in the second half, but it looks like it was just an improvement. So, oh, he's turned the game around. Yeah, that's something that happens all the time in competitive sports. Is that somebody starts out slow and starts strong. You don't really notice it when somebody has a really good performance and then they kind of slouch at the end and kind of drop off. It's just kind of like they just remember the good things that happen right there. So it's very interesting. That's a very interesting approach to the fraud, is saying, well, if they have a bad first half, they can make up for it, and everybody's going to forgive them if they have a good second half. So certainly one of those things that as stupid as this fraud was, that was actually pretty clever. That was actually pretty clever. And then rationalizations, we talked about the NIL deals, but also there's lots of money being traded in sports betting. So yeah, a lot of exchanges going on with respect to this, and it's really, really hard to kind of miss out on that rational, or to miss out on that chance. And so because of the lots of money, you're going to basically say, well, I'm going to try to come up with a way that can actually make the biggest advantage. Now, it's very interesting because I gave you multiple resources and they were all relatively short, but I think this one that talks about the Mays Fairley, this is the one that first of all got me on to talking about this when I was reading it on Yahoo, and I was saying, this is kind of interesting. And by the way, if you're wondering, if I looked at Yahoo, why did I give you an MSN link? The Yahoo one had even more pop-ups and ads than the MSN one. So that's the reason why I sort of shared that one. It was actually originally, I think, a Wall Street Journal article, but I didn't want to have to mess with the paywall, even though you can log in through a Truman State account and get registered through that. I tried to download the PDF and it was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to use the MSN article. But that's really not relevant to the discussion. So primary lessons learned from the case. My very first sentence that I have in my debrief on this is that I'm sorry, but this was just a stupid fraud. All right. Not everything that we're going to be doing in this class is going to be the masterminds doing these really complex illicit schemes where everybody was fooled. It's like, wow, that's just amazing. Sometimes I'm going to applaud me on this one. My hands are solidly at my side saying, yeah, you're an idiot. Yeah. So, consider the size of the sports betting and prediction markets. Apart from the firms involved, you have third-party watchdogs and the Department of Justice watching your actions. Trying to defraud all of those parties at the same time is just going to really problematic. What is that term that we talk about in accounting classes that we always strive for with respect to financial information? The T word. Transparency. What is the level of transparency on sporting markets and sports betting and prediction markets? It's like a clean pane of glass that somebody's constantly using Windex on it, just trying to make sure that it's a lot clearer. There's no hidden transactions going on there, at least not from the end of the people who are operating. Now, the people who are trying to figure out what's going on the inside, they may not have full transparency. The people who are operating the markets, they know exactly what's happening. It's like, $500,000 on a game that has no traction whatsoever. This has got to be something that's interesting going on. And reading this guy, he's just kind of like confident. It's like saying, yeah, we're doing things, we're going to make a lot of money. It's like saying, okay, not only are you doing something that's going to be very obviously flagged as something that you track, but you're bragging about it on social media. I mean, this is just somebody like if I found out like I had a friend of his, I'd be like, no, I don't know these individuals, So yeah, talk about that. So some important notes to note. We talked about the starting out with the Chinese professional basketball games. Why would that have been kind of a little bit easier to manage if we're talking about the basketball games, the Chinese basketball games? What is the level of transparency on the sports betting markets with those? Probably a lot less, especially given that it's such a smaller market. It's going to be a lot easier to manage. And I think that was kind of where everything fell apart. If they'd done that and kind of been caught after that, it'd say, well, I can understand the nature of the fraud scheme. By the way, does it trouble anybody that I'm scrutinizing the fraud scheme, saying it was a good idea or a bad idea? I know, so it kind of seems like counterproductive. I know that I'm teaching you how to commit fraud, and I'm going to say, if you get caught on a fraud scheme like this, I'm going to disown you. Okay, it's like, no, that was not my student. That was somebody else. If you get caught on a really complex fraud scheme, like a Madoff Ponzi scheme that only unraveled after like 20 years, they'll be like, well, they did their best. All right, they hit it for 20 years, and that was pretty well done. Okay, but this one, yeah, I would not acknowledge you as a student. In fact, I'd go into the Truman records and scrub your presence onto the Truman State from Truman State. I had an insult to injury right there. Yeah, and so also they talked about the NBA games. Where was NBA games information coming from? Did anybody catch that in kind of the debriefs? So it's coming from poker games. Like the coaches were playing in poker games with contacts, and they were saying, "Yeah, I think I'm going to sit this player during the game." And so they'd say, "Oh, I bet we can make sports bet on that and take a trade on it." It's like that's kind of the analogy that we would talk about from a business perspective would be like insider trading, and so that's kind of the parallel that would conduct. Anything else interesting that you all identified with respect to this? There's a lot going on here. It was really, really short and intentionally because, again, we got interrogations today, but I thought there was a lot of fascination with this particular scheme, apart from the fact that it was doomed to fail from the beginning. Anybody inspired to now go onto the sports betting markets to see if you can actually commit a massive fraud? So yeah, you could actually go onto the prediction markets and say, what are the odds that Dr. Barnes is going to use an incorrect word? How many? It's not that's not even a good one. I'm definitely going to use an incorrect word over the course. Many times am I going to stumble over myself in the course of a lecture? I'm sure the prediction markets will go wild on that one. Yeah. So the question is, yeah, at least I've gotten better about typing during class. That was one of those things. So story time. One of my advanced AIS classes, we used to be on Blackboard, and Blackboard does not have a spell check tool the way Brightspace does. So I actually issued a quiz in my advanced AIS class that had no fewer than 10 typos in it. My students legitimately thought I was having a stroke. It was yeah. All right, let's go ahead and start the quiz then.